Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are getting to know each other. So please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from. Please rename your name with your congressional district if you know it, or your city. And tell us what you're hoping to learn today. And if you're working in anything exciting, please let us know. We want to know. The idea is that we get to know each other here in this space, and we hopefully can work together in a collaborative and symbiotic way. And also tell us what organizations are you associated with. My name is Solemia Hernandez. I am currently in Naples, Florida, the traditional land of the Calusa tribe. I am Citizens Climate Lobby Southeast Regional Coordinator, and my work is to support volunteers organizing to build political will in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Citizens Climate Lobby is a nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots advocacy climate change organization focused on national policies to address the national and global climate crisis. We train and support volunteers to build relationships with elected officials, the media, and with their local communities. By focusing on shared values rather than bipartisan divides, we build relationships with community leaders, with elected officials, and with Congress, always starting by a place of respect, gratitude, and appreciation. CCL volunteers are organized into hundreds of local chapters across the United States and internationally. And if you want to help us build political will for climate solutions, please join us using the link I'm going to put in the chat in a moment. And I'm also going to put in the chat a recent article from Yale Climate Connections that featured CCL last June Lobby Day in DC, which it was super exciting and empowering. So welcome again, everyone. And thank you for joining us. I am really excited and honored to share this space with all of you and these wonderful climate champions doing amazing work in Florida. Wendy?
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I'm so excited to see each and every one of you. I've got to know some of you at the recent CCL conference in DC and also attending some of the CCL meetings. I get to be on here because I am I'm the executive director for Volo Foundation, and we support in grant making around $9 million a year and to our organization's mission, which is to accelerate change and global impact by supporting science-based climate solutions, enhancing education, and improving health. So we do support Citizens Climate Lobby and two of the wonderful organizations that you'll be hearing from today, which is Dawn from the Environmental Defense Front and Yoka with the Clio Institute. And I just wanted to say thank you to Salemi and Zori for being so responsive when I just made the suggestion that we could have a conversation with the Clio Institute and EDF. They had this great idea. Salemi had this idea to include all of you to hear what we're about to hear today. So I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to the presentations to follow. And I will turn that over to Dawn.
Thank you, Wendy, and thanks, Salemi, and everyone for being here tonight. I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm going to try to move through things at a quick enough pace that we could dig in and ask questions. So I would welcome that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick, but as I do, for those of you who don't know, Environmental Defense Fund is a global organization. We were founded in 1967 when we fought the use of DDT that was destroying habitat and bird life, and has grown into an international and global organization since then, with fighting climate change as our North Star, with a heavy focus on science and pragmatic bipartisan solutions. I've been the director for the state of Florida since 2020, but I've been a longtime resident. So thanks for being here, all of you. And let me see if this works. You guys see that slide? Do you see the slide? Yes, no, yes. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
great. Oh, there we go. All right. So, you guys are all here because you're already invested in climate change. You already understand the threats to Florida. So I'm not going to focus on the increased heat. I'm not going to talk about the more intense hurricanes or the flooding or even the loss of homeowners insurance or agriculture, because those are whole other talks and probably talks that this group doesn't really need because you are already educated and here to commit to making a change. So today, what I'm going to try to spend some time on is sharing why changing Florida's energy landscape is critical, not just to tackling climate change, but actually to protecting our health and economy for those of us that are lucky enough to live here. So just as a little kind of high level background, power plants are responsible for about 25% of climate pollution in the United States. But here in Florida, is one of the top 3 polluting states in the US. The good news is voters overwhelmingly support more clean energy in Florida and the creation of a state energy plan. We'll talk a little bit about more of that, but I want to give you just a touch of background. This advances, there we go, on what Florida's energy landscape really looks like. So first is most folks don't even realize that we are one of the largest energy producing states in the country. That's significant because we're actually producing our energy from our natural resources. We're importing natural gas to the tune of about $5 billion a year to generate electricity in Florida. So, unlike Texas that has natural oil reserves, our power generation is based on an imported resource. It is also true that electric generation produces 43% of our state's greenhouse gas pollution. So if we want to tackle climate in Florida, we simply cannot ignore power generation. And I mentioned that, our electricity is generated by imported fuel. So that's significant, but it's also significant that it's 75% of our power comes from a single source. So if there were any, let's say, disruptions in pipeline, changing market conditions, we have essentially put all of our eggs in one basket. And Jeb Bush was actually on the record in 2005 when we were about 43% reliant on natural gas as a state, ringing the alarm bell that this was incredibly risky and it wasn't the most sound practice. Unfortunately, his concerns went unheard, and we continued to allow the utilities to build new natural gas over other alternatives. So why is it a problem for us today? Well, the reality is the price of natural gas is volatile. Even with the US able to sort of meet the needs of some domestic demands, events like what's going on in Ukraine really, just shift into unpredictable places what our natural gas costs are going to look like. In just the last year, we have seen 20 to 35% increases in gas. So for those of you sort of looking at your bill and trying to figure out why it's going up, that is the main driver. On average, an FPL residential customer is now paying $39 more each month today than they were paying in January of 2020. This unpredictability in gas prices is creating a lot of uncertainty, not just in family budgets, but in businesses who have major electrical costs they need to be able to navigate. This was about $3.5 billion in increases in just the last 12 months. This is a 10-year high. We'd had some projections from the utilities just a few years ago that said we would be hitting these levels in 10 years, not in 2. And so we're really trying to sort of deal with the fact that we are, seeing these really erratic and volatile prices, and we already pay as Floridians 13% more on our energy than the rest of the United States. So, it is a big jump for us to have to absorb these costs, and not everybody can afford it. The other reality is it's 2023 and renewable energy and clean energy is less expensive. Now, this study, I'll try to just pull out the data because it's a little tricky to look at, but solar is about $10 per megawatt hour cheaper than a new natural gas plant. So, which is about 70 megawatts, $70 per megawatt hour. You would think that just based on these unsubsidized costs, it would be a no-brainer that Florida utilities would say, hey, why wouldn't I, create the lowest cost energy so that I can keep my customers' rates down? Well, our monopoly utilities are actually not incentivized to do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, they are not paying the bill for the natural gas. 100% of the shifts in the natural gas costs get passed on to the customer. So let's talk about what that means. Let's say we're going car shopping. Maybe I grab Wendy to see if she'll come along with me. And I'm looking at two options. Maybe I'm looking at an EV and a gas guzzler. And I'm looking at the sticker prices, and they're about the same. Or maybe the EV is even a little bit more expensive. And I decide to buy the gas guzzler and hand Wendy the bill for all of my fuel costs for the life of the vehicle. That is the equivalent of how the utilities are making the choices on energy decisions, because they are not absorbing those fuel costs. In fact, some of the utilities have ownership in the pipelines that transmit the gas into the state, which means they're actually profiting from the fossil fuel use above and beyond what they're earning from the ratepayers who are paying 100% of that gas cost. So it's a really tricky situation. And because they have a captive customer base as monopolies, they're completely insulated from free market competition. They don't have to drive down to the lowest price because you as a customer can't go anywhere else for your power source. The last bit of policy that is concerning is there's something called the Florida Power Plant Siting Act. This law basically allows ratepayers to pick up 110% of the cost of creating new power plants, pays for all the advertising, all the lawyers, every foreseeable cost for building a new power plant. That's a pretty good return on investment. 10 cents back for every dollar you spend, you're actually incentivized to spend more money. So now that we've talked about why natural gas is not necessarily the most affordable option, I should go back and make one quick point. The Inflation Reduction Act actually changes the numbers that you saw in this last slide by about $5 per megawatt hour because of the new benefits and subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act. So I purposely showed you the unsubsidized analysis because not everybody has sort of yet fully realized the potential impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, but understand that will even further widen the gap on why renewables are more affordable. Okay, so you may or may not know that natural gas is largely composed of methane, which is 80 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2. It's also pretty bad for our health. So natural gas, as it's extracted and processed, can leak pollutants into the atmosphere, exposing people who live nearby to toxics like benzene, a known carcinogen. And those tend to create smog-forming pollutants that cause respiratory illnesses, particularly in children. There was actually a University of South Florida study in 2015 that found connections between the maternal exposure to benzene and birth defects in their offspring. Florida has 9 of the dirtiest power plants in the country. And we can't even handle that at a local level anymore because in 2021, Governor DeSantis signed a law preempting local governments from having any decision-making authority on what type of energy they want generated for their community. As a result, the only way we can make significant shifts is having a new statewide strategy. So I think there's a lot of reasons why I believe Floridians deserve and demand access to clean and affordable energy, but this particular image really struck me. This is the path, I'm sure all of you are familiar with spaghetti models, but this was the path of Hurricane Ian last year. As we're coming up on the anniversary of it, an S&P Global report showed this to highlight that 26 different power plants were in the path of the storm. So this is really a focus on reliability, right? We are a hurricane vulnerable state. And I don't know about you, but I didn't realize that gas plants have to be shut down in high winds. As we see increased temperature, all of a sudden it's a little bit more concerning that nuclear plants have to have water at a certain temperature to cool, or they also need to be shut down. We are seeing over and over again in Texas that as we get these drastic weather increases, it is natural gas plants that fail first. In fact, renewable power has been keeping the Texas grid alive for the last month or two during this heat dome impact. So we really have more than just, climate change reasons to consider our vulnerability. We have a need to diversify our energy sources, because if we are very dependent on a number of power plants that get hit by one of these hurricanes, we have a real crisis on our hands, and we can't afford to let that happen. Granted, I want to be clear, and I'm going to quote former FPL CEO Eric Szilagyi here, there is no such thing as a hurricane-proof electrical grid. That's not a thing. But by diversifying and decentralizing Florida's power, we can build in redundancy and resiliency that we need. And I'll leave this slide up for a minute. I'm hoping that we can all use the QR code. This is a new, how can we convert people across technologies? But if you scan that QR code with your phone, it will take you to an action alert to tell Florida policymakers that it is time for a state energy plan. We are one of the few states that does not dictate to utilities that they need to diversify their energy supply. That's how we landed in this position. We can set those goals. We are actually also one of the states that does not require any energy efficiency from our utilities. That means we are wasting a lot of power that we can ill afford to lose. We also know that in the next week, the EPA is completing the collection of comments on their new proposal that would limit climate pollution from existing fossil fuel power plants. So folks that are inclined to send those comments to the EPA can really help support that. We have already seen the Florida Public Service Commission suggest that the rules are too stringent. Well, they would be if you've allowed 75% of your power to come from a single source. We need to get new limits in place to continue to push us into a more diversified energy portfolio. And then the last is really what you as a resident can do. You can find ways to invest in energy efficiency. There are a number of options that are available, especially under the Inflation Reduction Act, to get rebates on putting solar on your home, on getting increased insulation or more efficient appliances. And so I wanted to share those as a couple. I know it's hard to go over everything today, but I'm hoping this was a little bit helpful in thinking about how we can shift Florida's future and actually be in the driver's seat for what comes next. With that, I will turn it over to you unless there's questions, Yoka.
All right. Thumbs up. You can see. Okay, so I wait for questions afterwards. Sorry, navigating different. Can you see can you hear the video or no?
Yes.
You can hear it?
No, we have, no.
Okay, let's start again.
The climate crisis is such a big, unique beast that it takes finding clever ways to infiltrate people's hearts and minds so they see themselves as agents of change. So in 2010, I had just left working on creating education programs, and I wanted to create a nonprofit that would use education as a tool for engagement so that I could wake sleeping giants.
We need our community in this fight. We can't wait for politicians and elected officials to do something. We need the people, the community to be engaged.
And Clio was born because of that. The Clio Institute was like, we'll take this on.
From the community-wide events where we gather together hundreds of residents to really walk for the protection of our common home, our planet, to creating innovative campaigns that awaken people by conveying and communicating really complex issues in a very creative way.
The Clio Institute's main focus is giving people the tools to connect the dots and understand why the climate crisis is an important issue in our lifetime. And it also gives them the tools to advocate at a local level so that everyone can get involved.
Probably the thing I am most proud of is the strategies we have used to address the climate justice issues. It's not only about sea level rise. It's about heat and health and food and water insecurity. It's about displacement, repetitive flooding.
One program is called Empowering Resilient Women. And with this program, we engage with women who are leaders within their communities.
I've been in those communities. I am a part of the communities that we go to.
We have taught people how to take the table to the community.
That's how I learned about the Clio Institute. I went to one of her meetings that they had, and I realized that she was on to something.
We also teach them the skills necessary to go into their communities and get other people engaged, or to go to their elected officials and raise their voice and be heard.
We also have our Climate Resilient Schools program, which is aimed at middle and high school students as well as teachers. And the goal there is to bring climate literacy inside of our schools. One of the things that inspire me the most is working with our Gen Clio youth movement.
I love what I do at Clio because I am an educator at heart, and I still get to be involved in education. I still get to give students the tools and the resources they need to become youth leaders in their community.
Seeing the youth going and talk to politicians or people who are decision makers, because they're trying to impact their decisions in a positive way.
What I do now at Clio allows me to be that sort of guiding person to other people in my position who would otherwise not know how to get involved.
We're going to spark you, build your capacity, and have you take off and give you all the resources you need.
Watching those 16-year-olds talk to our city commissioners about what they wanted to see on the budget was really the example of how Clio is having an impact in this community.
We cannot have an apathetic audience with this climate crisis. We need everybody engaged, and so Clio is bold that way.
If we don't act now, we are gonna lose everything that is precious to us. I feel that we are in an inflection point here in Florida, and we need that extra push, that fuel that could take us to the top.
The success stories have been very rewarding and makes me feel like if we could do a little bit more of this in very intentional ways, we could fix this.
All right, we can fix this. And I wanted to have my team do the introduction about the Clio Institute in such a beautiful way with this almost 4-minute video. And you heard that one of our team members said that she went to a Clio workshop many years ago and saw our founder, Caroline Lewis, speak. And she said she was onto something. And she was. For the last 13 years, the Clio Institute has been really building climate literacy and really fostering and advocating for climate action for the last 13 years. I have been part of the Clio Institute for more than 5 years now, became the executive director almost 5 years ago. And I'm excited to talk about one of the things that gives me great hope and that you heard me talk about the video, which is working with our youth and how I see building the youth movement as a pathway to really get us to win. And so let's start by putting some things into context. We know that leaders respond to pressure, that pressure is created by movement. and the movements are built by thousands of individuals, many like us. We are building a movement. Sometimes we're too close to the tree to see the forest, but the reality is the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, it's really a testament of how we're building a movement. Now, we all know that that's not enough, that we need to decarbonize the grid, as you heard Don said, that we need to fix our food and agriculture system, that we need to protect and invest in nature-based solutions, that we need to remove carbon, that we need to clean up our transportation and our industries. But really, we have seen over time this issue become more prominent. We're seeing a lot more news coverage. We hear people talking about this, perhaps not connecting the dots with the climate crisis, but really talking about the rising heat, the extreme weather events. And so we start to see how a movement is building because it becomes salient. And where we're gonna see the shift that we need is when that issue rises to the top of the public agenda and bring voters to the poll. And so despite all the progress that we have seen in the last few years, climate has yet become to the level that it needs to be of importance for elected officials. And the speed and scale framework, which really is a roadmap to how to get us to net zero by 2050 and cutting our carbon pollution by half by 2030, outlines different actions that we need to take. But most importantly, we need the accelerators. And one of those accelerators is to really continue to create the movement that I've been talking about. In Europe right now, led by Greta Thunberg, climate has become a top 1 or 2 issue. It fluctuates for politicians and for voters. Right now, climate, it fluctuates around an issue around number 9 on a scale of 10. But here in Florida, we continue to see that it becomes more of a relevant issue year after year. It turns out that young voters in the last 3 elections have been crucial to win some key battlegrounds, and I'll go into detail about that, and being climate one of their top concerns as voters. Now, so at the Clio Institute, we've been working with the youth movement for many, many years. And so we have really set ourselves several priorities for the next upcoming elections, to really scale the youth movement across the state and to really get the youth out to vote, to elect climate champions, making climate a top voting issue that no candidate can ignore. Now, are there signs of movements? Is there hope? Is there past precedents? Yes, there is. I mean, obviously, Floridians are waking up to all the terrible headlines we're seeing with the different kind of climate impacts we all have been experiencing. But there is polling and data that points that, soon this will not be an effective partisan wedge issue. Majority of Floridians believe the climate is changing. We are seeing that many support governmental action. Younger Democrats and Republicans are leading this trend, with 64% of GOP or Democratic voters under 35 in total support. We see the majority of Floridians, more than 70% of Floridians, current support teaching climate in public and K through 12 classrooms. And we see majority of support also in the Federal Inflation Reduction Act that just passed last year. So the momentum and support continues to grow. Gen Z voters were, as I said, have had climate as a top of mind on their voting. And we have already starting to see in many key races playing a huge role in swing state elections, both in Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, and many of these Gen Z voters heavily contributed to the narrow Democratic wins in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Kansas. Gen Zs continue to vote with their hearts and mind, and many of their social issues will be the ones really making an impact at the polls, whether they are abortion access, LGBTQ rights, racial equity, climate, gun violence, and the very future of our democracy. These are the main issues Gen Zs are really prioritizing. And no better place than to highlight the first Gen Z member of Congress, Congressman Will Frost, who won here in Florida in with the climate agenda, who has really energized many Gen Zers across the country. Now, the Clio Institute has been building this movement. As I said, last year we scaled our efforts to 6 different campuses across. Just in the last 6 months ago, we have hosted more than 30 events, recruited more than 250 new volunteers, more than 800 petitions signed, and we continue to build that movement. We're going to continue adding new chapters through the state, continue pushing giants. This brought 50 students to Tallahassee to Lobby Day. We hope next week we can triple that. We're going to focus on really getting out the vote, making sure students are registering, getting candidate scorecards, and using the power of media to really highlight the importance. Our youth movement has been pivotal in pushing our utilities in many ways. Last year, we did together with several partners push FPL and really stop with the greenwashing and to really focus on putting a climate goal. Just a few months later, we actually ended up learning about the real zero commitment. FPL came out. Push PSD on energy efficiency, and we still are pushing them on the risk commission, but also 10-year site plan. So the pivotal now the utility sector. So the movement is really as our
yeah. If you want to turn off maybe your camera and see if we can hear you better.
Sure. So our Jane Clear movement, really, we see as Florida's next way of defense in the climate crisis. We'll continue to build movement. We can really try to persuade candidates to the top priorities. The climate change. We have a program with the goal of identifying voters who the climate one of the 2 most important issues. The education needed to mobilize those voters to the poll. We'll continue allowing a regional local events, speaking forth. Region with unique plan throughout Florida, and be data-driven, using platforms so we really leverage and more efficient.
We cannot hear you. Yeah, the sounds is still kind of broken at the end.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
If everybody turns their camera on video on their their video off and mutes themselves, she will have a better connection.
Yeah, because my Wi-Fi seems to be okay. Can you hear me? Can you?
It's better now. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a little of that, and if not, the slides will give the story. But our again continue to highlight, to build capacity throughout the next upcoming elections. We already started planning lobby day for 2024 for the next legislative session. Tomorrow, actually tonight, we're receiving 16 state to our headquarters in Miami to start preparing for events that we have now. Now, there is impact, there's potential impact, but sadly, there's still a lot of done. Only 20% of voters age 18 to 24 voted in our last 2022 election. In Broward County, only 30%. In Miami-Dade County, only 25%. Need to increase those numbers. Now, despite all that, Florida has had close election, gubernatorial races, amendments, and different legislative races have been decided by very few votes. So there's opportunity there. And so the hope is that we continue building this movement, building really the infrastructure we need for the upcoming elections that come. And so again, like I said, our priority will be to scale youth movement and making sure that climate becomes a top voting issue in the state of Florida in the next cycle. And we hope that you're part of the movement. So another code today, scan it, register, and you'll get to receive a lot of the information that we'll put together as far as the education in the next elections to come. So thank you so much. I look forward to any questions in the Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan and Yoka, for that wonderful information. We're going to go to Q&A. I noticed that there's 2 questions in the chat first. But I lost them. So please raise your hand and ask questions, or you can put it on the chat, whatever it's easier or better for you. Any questions for Dan or Yoka? Uncomfortable silence. We got Philip. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, hi. Thank you guys both for your presentations. I'm starting graduate school at University of Florida, and I'm interested. I did a lot of stuff with CCL at my college in Virginia, and I'm interested in continuing to do some stuff going forward at University of Florida. And I'm just interested to learn more about what kind of opportunities you have for college students and learning more about what's going on.
Hi, so I'm gonna answer from my end, and then I'm sure Salemi will talk about CCL's initiatives, and same with Dawn. But at the Clio Institute, we offer different types of opportunities. So if you can just become a member, I'll put the link on the chat. I think that would be the first way to start. We host different events. Some of them are online, some of them are in person. We also have field trips. The last 2 weeks ago, actually, members of Gen Clio in South, Central, and North Florida went to different state and national parks. Some of them were with guiding park rangers. Some of them were to see the manatees and some of the Florida Springs. So there's different type of opportunities, as well as volunteering, canvassing, tabling, and just last week we hosted a film screening called To the End, which talks about the stories of 4 young women that really have prioritized climate action. And so we did that as a statewide film screening with students. But there is a huge array of opportunities. It just depends on the kind of time, commitment, and interest that you may have. So reach out. I'll put the link on the chat.
They're asking for your email address too, and Dan, if you could put yours as well. I'm pretty sure people will want to reach out. And yeah, we did we did a awesome lobby day in Tallahassee with the Clio Institute, and that was a great experience. 130 people, 130,
150.
100. Wow. So it went great. It went really well. So yeah, just let us know. We're getting involved with the Clio and plans things together. The more, the better. So, and if we can work together in collaboration, that's perfect. Like she said, we're building a movement, and this is part of doing so. Caroline?
Thank you so much. Dawn and Yoka, your leadership in this space is so needed, and I thank you for that. The energy portfolio you talk about, Dawn, is something that should be a no-brainer. And Yoka, the whole idea of a movement is where we are right now. And we need to, as you well know, accelerate that movement loudly and clearly. You know, to me, when you stand on the side of science and justice, you do not need to apologize to open your mouth and speak up. But my question for you too is about methane, is about fracked gas, is about this big lie that's still being repeated out there about methane being so much cleaner than oil and coal, not factoring the leaks at the wells at extraction and at abandonment. So, Dawn, I heard that EF had contributed to a satellite in space that would measure and hold accountable the methane leaks at the sites where people claim that there were no more methane leaks. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so METSAT is an actual satellite that EDF will be launching, hopefully early 2024, to be able to detect the actual point sources of methane leaks and therefore be able to go in and get those repaired and eliminate those carbon pollution things. And I say EDF prioritized science, that's what I'm talking about. Really excited about this new tool that will really, there are a few other ways that some of them are detected, but they're not able to get us the granular and real-time data that METSAT's going to be able to help us with. And so I think, part of this is really understanding that a lot of the carbon pollution is also coming from just waste, right? And that nobody benefits from that, not the utilities, not the oil and gas industry, and certainly not the public, right? So finding those places where we can fix leaks is going to take us, several major steps into cutting climate pollution. And for those of you, who aren't familiar, methane really is significant in that it is an accelerator of climate change. So it actually makes climate change worse faster, even though it has a shorter lifespan than carbon pollution.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. The question that it went away, it's like here again. What was the bill called DeSantis signed limiting the rights of communities in choosing their type of energy?
I think somebody put a link in to answer that, but it was the 2021, let me just find the bill number. It was Senate Bill 1128 in 2021 called the Preemption over Restriction of Utility Services.
First is the Senate number and the second one is the House number too, right?
Yeah, House number was 919.
All right, thank you so much. Philip and Ed?
Okay, this is me this time. The Inflation Reduction Act has a provision to place a fee, a methane fee on leaking methane. I'm wondering if you're going to somehow be feeding whatever agency would be assessing that fee with the METSAT.
So EDF is not sort of in a position of accepting or directing any of the funds that those fees would generate. And I personally can't speak to exactly, how those funds are planned to be used. And that's sort of the beauty of having an independent satellite. And by the way, all of this information that the satellite produces will be publicly sourced. So in real time, when this is up, you will be able to log in and find that information out to yourself. The idea here is we want to be transparent, and EDF, doesn't benefit from this outside of helping address the issue. I think there are probably a lot of questions around, how fees will get leveraged. And as so many other parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, the policies are still sort of being fine-tuned.
Thank you. So we have another question here. Will the new law in Florida also affect our ability to change the sources of energy for a municipal power company?
The law passed in 2021 will prevent local governments from passing any rules requiring renewable energy at the at the local government level, which is why we're sort of advocating that a statewide plan saying there needs to be a diversity of resources to strengthen our power sector is necessary, because the cities and the counties are no longer legally allowed to do it on their own. That does not mean that members of communities are not still working to push back on plants. There was recently a liquefied natural gas plant that was planned, and there was a real objections from the local community, and ultimately that plus market conditions did kill the progress for that plant to be built. So, you know, I don't want this to discourage folks from advocating for, you know, their community power generation, but understand that the local governments don't have the legal authority to respond to those requests.
Thank you. Michelle?
Hi, it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, Nyoka and Salemi and Philip and Ed. Good to see you guys from CCL and Wendy. One thing I just wanted to put out there is, you know, school boards are an area that kids, I think, should definitely focus on. You know, they have the biggest moral authority to say we want changes in our schools, and there's a huge gap between school operations and what kids understand needs to happen with excessive food waste and idling buses and cold classrooms. So I just wanted to mention, and also Dave Finnegan, hi Dave, that we're trying to engage parents and students just at the most local level to green schools, because it is a no-brainer when it's explained the way, you know, Dawn does and Yoka does and Jen Cleo. It just explains, like, your costs are going up. It's the second biggest cost after teacher salaries. You can put on solar panels. The restrictions DeSantis just imposed have no impact on the 30% rebate that schools get back. So, you know, I would just love to see that bringing, you know, Jen Cleo to parents and PTAs as well as an extracurricular, but really getting it in the schools as well.
Yeah, 100% agree, Michelle. And as you know, we have been very active. The Jen Cleo members were very active with the Miami-Dade County Commission, school board, sorry. And they were instrumental also in passing the clean energy plan at the district. So I absolutely agree. There's a lot of opportunity. There are small battles happening in school boards, particularly in the state of Florida, and I think that many of them intersect. So we actually have them as a priority in our plans.
Yeah, and mention, I mean, DeSantis has expressly targeted Luisa Santos, who really embraced our resolution request for 100% clean energy by 2030. I mean, she made that commitment. So I just want to make sure that we protect those school board members that are trying to move the needle in Florida. And we're trying with Florida PTA to make that momentum happen as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Michelle. We have, is there any way we can get a copy of this program to show locally? I don't know, Jean, what program are you talking? Maybe Yoka's presentation or Don's presentation?
Especially Dawn's presentation. We're a continuing care retirement community in Florida.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah, we can. I'm going to put also my email there. Yoka and Dan, if you can send me your presentation and I can send it to everybody else after this meeting. And yeah, send me an email, Jean, and I can send you that. I'm going to put it in the chat. Can that same satellite technology identify methane for thawing in permafrost? I didn't pronounce that right.
That's a more technical question than I'm able to answer, but I don't think so.
Well, it seems to me that, Dawn, if it's leaking methane when permafrost melts, wouldn't the satellite pick it up if it leaks methane?
let's not pretend I have a science degree. What I can do is have someone that works on the METHSTAT team respond, after this call, but I have a strict policy of not making up answers I don't know.
Yeah, well, what I meant by that question was that there's all this talk about in Siberia and along the Arctic Circle, there's so much permafrost that's thawing, and the degradation of well, anyway, a lot of methane is being released, and I was just wondering if that would be picked up, but I apologize for it being a technical question.
That's a question I will have too. I mean, this is so interesting. I can't imagine a satellite measuring methane. That's amazing.
And it's so
anyway-
relevant too. It's super relevant, the conversation. And I put on the chat a link for the first ever White House Methane Summit. So the Biden-Harris administration are hosting a summit. So if you wanna take a look at it, it's on the chat. I'm sure a lot of new initiatives will be coming of that.
Yeah, that's super cool. Anyone else have questions? Probably, I don't know if I skip your questions, please let me know.
If I can ask about the Clio Institute and how they teach and who they're teaching and the methodology, if somebody could talk a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. And our founder, who is, you can't never, her voice doesn't go ever unnoticed, especially since you listen to this here, so she can chime in, who's a science teacher who founded the Clio Institute. So Clio approaches climate education from the bottom up and the top bottom. So we work with communities, schools, particularly middle and high schools, with teachers, with municipalities, with academia, organizations, and as well with grassroots and leaders on the basics of climate science, the urgency of the climate crisis, and the solutions that we have at hand. We focus only on the most reputable science and scientific organizations like NOAA and NASA. We really deconstruct complex abstract science into digestible nuggets for the lay public, so people can really understand and connect the dots on how putting heat trapping gases in the atmosphere is warming our atmosphere and warming our planet, and how this big blanket that we are creating wrapping around our planet is really creating havoc in our climate. But it's really a focus on very simple information, but everything science and data driven information. We can do climate 101s for the very beginners, or very complex climate trainings that could be focused on the intersection of climate and health, intersection of climate and food systems, the intersection of so many of the themes and topics that we know are impacted by a warming, changing climate. So that all our trainings, by the way, are free. We have a climate speakers network program where it's a more in-depth training where participants join for a 3 to 4 week cohort, and we go through very detailed information on what the greenhouse gas effect is, and again, talking about how that translate into different impacts we are seeing at the local and also national and global level. We talk about the different solutions that we have to solve the climate crisis, and also engage the participants to be more civically engaged, to be part of the solution, to create their own climate roadmap, on the solutions that they can embrace to be part of the solution. So hopefully that answered your question. Caroline, you want to add on the line? Maybe she's not.
I think that was brilliant. No, I think you got it all, Yuka.
Okay. Steven, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And we take this last question from Amira. I hope I pronounced your name right. But go ahead.
You did, thank you. Hi, my name is Amira. I am a student at Dreyfus School of the Arts in Palm Beach County, and I'm super motivated about teaching kids about climate change and exposing them to that early on. What I did with an organization linked to FAU was publish a storybook with them, and it was about climate change and environment, like sustainability and bouncing back from a hurricane and community resilience. I wanted to know if Clio does interactive projects outside of teaching the high school, middle school kids that engages them further in their own activism and like climate change journey.
Mira, thanks for the question. I actually love that question. We try to engage in different ways. And I'll mention 2 different campaigns that we did together with the Bolo Foundation. One is our Melting Florida campaign, and the other one is Florida, the State of Emergency. And these are very innovative campaigns that really use not only technology, but the art as well, and make them more of a artism-focused campaign. So using art as the medium to convey those really important messages in a very simple way, where we're part of 2 different out of the box, if you will, more interactive way that we develop campaigns throughout the state. They're on our website, on our YouTube channel, on social media as well, but happy to put some links you to do your journey. We have a Clio Teachers Network, which you can sign up and get specific information for teachers. We host teacher development, professional development programs throughout the year. Some of them are in person, some of them have been virtual. So if you want to stay in touch, don't go ahead and sign up to receive that information. And at the same time, like I said, approach climate and our teachings in different ways, depending on the age, depending on the audience, and depending on the interest. We have hosted programs that I know participated in one of them, which was about climate and food policy last summer. So we try to really bring in a robust amount of programming for our participants. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Thank you, Yoka, to you and to Dan. We have in Citizens Climate Lobby, we have a great electrification challenge. We're looking to get a resolution passed for school boards. I put it on the chat, so if you guys want to look in it and work together with us on that, we're running that campaign at the national level. And we have a lot of high school students interested in working on this campaign in many places here in Florida. So I'm really excited. Check it out. So we are out of time. Dave, Wendy, could you put your question on the chat, Dave, please?
I just wanted to tell Amira to get in touch with me because we're working with elementary school kids nationwide with the Green Actioneers program. So anybody who wants to deal with the elementary school kids and their parents, Green Actioneers is your organization. We're starting a movement at the elementary level to mesh with what you're starting at the middle school and high school level. And so please, it's Dave Finnegan at greenactioneers.com. I put it in the chat, and I'd love to talk to you, Amira, about what we could do together.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Wendy, real quick, do you wanted to add something?
Quick, I just wanted to encourage Amira and even Dave, we have a, Bola Foundation is sponsoring the St. Jude Palm Beach Walk Run, and we're gonna have a table with environmental education. So we're gonna have a coloring book for kids. So we're just creating that. So maybe we can also connect and make that happen. We would love to see each and every one of you there.
Do you have a date?
I will get that. Maybe I can get it by the time this call's over. So I'll put it in the post. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, and I will send an email with the recording, hopefully the 2 presentations and the information that you guys requested. Thank you very much for joining us, for staying 1 minute more with us. This was great. I hope you connected with other people in the movement. I hope this inspired you to organize in your community. Thank you for taking action, because you took action 2 times. I'm gonna leave you with 1 more that we have in CCL, Brad, your member of Congress. And you can do it about carbon pricing, the Prove It Act, and you can spread the word in social media. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the
Thank
week.
you, everybody.
That date is
Keep
Saturday,
going.
September 23rd. September 23rd on a Saturday.
You.
Thank you, Salemi.
Thank you, Yoka.
Thank you,
and
Wendy, for
John.
putting this together. Thank you.